Okay, this tutorial we're going to just walk through how to name some compounds. So you can see here I've got what looks like a whole bunch of water molecules floating around. You know water is H2O, but we're going to look at how you can actually name things. So you'll have seen in the lab, and we'll have used lots of complicated names like sodium chloride and magnesium sulfate and all those sorts of things. And now we're going to look at how we actually get those names. And it's actually pretty simple. There's a nice little system behind it. So let's get started. So firstly, guys, if a compound contains a metal, then its name goes first. I like to use the analogy that, guys, this is like two people getting married. When we make a compound, two or more elements join together. So it's just like in a marriage, a man and a woman kind of join, become one. We often say they become one. And it's tradition, actually, if a man and a woman get married, it's often on the invitations and things like that, it's often the man's name who goes first. So you tend to see in letters and things, it'll say Mr. and Mrs. So sorry girls, it's a bit old-fashioned, but it tends to be the guy's name who goes first. So like that, guys, it's the metals whose name goes first when we're naming the compound. Number 2, if there are only two elements in the compound, then it will end in "ide." So it's the non-metal, the girl, whose the end of her name is the one that changes. So for instance, this one FeS, that's iron and sulfur, becomes iron sulfide. So instead of being iron sulfur, it's iron sulfide. That tells us that they're a couple. So let's look at a couple of examples. So CuO, we've got here copper and oxygen, so that would be called copper oxide. Here we've got Ca. Now guys, I know that's one element. I know it's not two things because this is a capital and this is a lowercase. So that's calcium and this is sulfur. So this would be calcium sulfide. Calcium sulfide. So a couple more examples. There's my answers. Copper oxide and calcium sulfide. So it's just the names, but the ending of the woman's name, so the non-metal, changes to "ide" instead of its original ending. Number 3, many compounds that contain a non-metal also contain oxygen. Rather than mentioning the oxygen, the ending is simply changed to "ate." So guys, if we've got three things, a metal, a non-metal, and oxygen as well, then so think of that as maybe we've got the man and the woman and the kids have come along now too, we don't bother mentioning them. But what that means is the ending just changes a little bit again. So for instance here, we've got copper, Cu, sulfur, and oxygen. So copper sulfate. So instead of being copper sulfide, the 8 tells us that oxygen has come along too. So let's do another couple of examples. So what about this one? Pb, another tricky one. Might take you a little while to find that one on the periodic table, but it's definitely there. So I know again Pb is one element because the P is capital and the B is a lowercase. Alright, so if it was a capital P and a capital B, that would actually be phosphorus and boron. But capital P little b is one element, it's lead, which has sometimes had the old-fashioned name plumbum. So lead, Pb, alright, I know it's one thing, not phosphorus and boron, and that's why it's so important you do that second letter lowercase, alright, because if you did a capital P and a capital B, you'd be actually talking about something totally different. You'd have two completely different elements in there. So this is lead and iodine. So the name of this compound is lead iodide. Alright, let's try and name this one. So Al, aluminium, S, sulfur, and O, oxygen. Now remember, we're not going to include oxygen in the name. Alright, if oxygen was on its own, if there wasn't sulfur there, we would. But because we've got a metal, aluminium, a non-metal, sulfur. Now remember, if you're not sure, just look at which side of that staircase from boron, which side of the periodic table they're on. Metals on the left, non-metals on the right. So metal, aluminium, non-metal, sulfur, plus we got oxygen in there. So it's aluminium sulfate. So instead of being aluminium sulfide, because it's got the oxygen, sulfate. Aluminium sulfate. Now the numbers in brackets, you can ignore all of that. With the naming, it's just a matter of what elements are in there. So guys, aluminium sulfate. Ignore the numbers with the naming, just look at what's in there. Alright, how about this one? Cu is copper, and we did the other bit before, so sulfur and oxygen, copper sulfate. Copper sulfate. Alright, so the ending of the sulfur changes, it's still one word though, copper sulfate. One more. Okay, so magnesium, alright, Mg, nitrogen, and oxygen, so it's going to be magnesium nitrate. Magnesium nitrate. Okay, so that's basically it, guys. I hope that helped. A few examples there. I'm sure you can find plenty more in your textbook or even just look online. And so, guys, remember the basic rules for naming. Number one, the metal's name goes first. We've sometimes put mean questions in a test where we say, you know, sulfur combines with aluminium. And because we put sulfur first, a lot of students go to write sulfur's name down first. You just got to check that you're putting the metal's name always goes first. The ending of the other one, if it's just the two of them, changes to "ide," and if you've got oxygen hitching a ride too, or if oxygen has been added into our compound too, then the ending is "ate" instead of the "ide." So pretty straightforward, pretty cool. You can pretty much name a whole bunch of compounds now, just following those simple rules. So once again, guys, I hope that helped, and good luck for your test.